Hello and welcome back to our bonus episode where we are answering the wildcard question we proposed to Dr. Yasar Jarrar in our main episode for those made to do consulting. For a bit of context, we tried to make the wildcard question a little unexpected, thought-provoking, and the sky's the limit on how you can approach it. So, Dr. Yasar, how do you consult on projects that fall into the area of megatrends and when there is limited access to case studies, history, data to back up the strategies you create? Is there a formula?
So the answer is there's no formula, but that's the only form of consulting left now. So your wildcard question isn't throwing me off because that's what we've been doing for the last few years, and we think the future is going to be only like that. Does anybody believe that the next 5 years will look like the past 5 years? So if we don't believe that the next 5 years will look like the past 5 years, what is the value of experience in the last 5 years or data in the last 5 years? Everything we've done pre-COVID, pre-ChatGPT, pre-generative AI is useless now. I'll take you back to the days before iPad and iPhone. An iPad and iPhone isn't a product. It's the ability to interact with your phone through touch and through apps. Everything pre-2009, every experience you've gained is absolutely useless because the world started interacting through touch. And now, every day we come up with something new. I'm sure Elon Musk has a few things hidden for us. I'm sure that Nadella has a few things have been hidden for us. Some Chinese company, some Emirati company. So all the future is unknown to us. So here's what's happening in consulting now that we have to all live with, and then I'll tell you what the formula is. That is not a formula. Today we are like explorers in the old days, and those explorers in the old days used to sit on the ship, take some food, take some ammo, guns, whatever they carry, and they would reach the stage where the drone map ends, right? They had a drone map of the world that hasn't charted out the whole world, and they would stop at the end of this line where the drone map has ended, and they say, in front of us is Terra Incognita. This is the undiscovered land, and they say, here be dragons. Could be. How could you tell, right? You're standing at the foot of something that hasn't been charted before, and you're asked to go in. Now you're asked to go in, and you have two options. You either go in with a lot of agility, resilience, ability to learn very fast and adapt, or you go in thinking, don't worry, in the last 5 years, in the known map, we use these kind of tools. And you walk in. It's like walking into a battlefield, and you have prepared all your army for a ground battle. And then you discover there's sea in front of you. That's kind of a rubbish strategy. So you can't rely anymore on old data and old case studies. In fact, in my class, I challenge my students not to think about the past. I say, let's figure out what this company is going to do in the next 5 years with everything that's changing around us. Okay, look, in our parents' time, you would graduate as an accountant. You would live for 20, 30 years relying on that degree, accountant for life. Today, the half-life of knowledge is 6 months maximum. What you learn now could be completely redundant in 6 months. Could be useful. So what we should rely on is attitude and habits and capabilities, not skills and knowledge. Knowledge we can renew daily. Skills will become obsolete very quickly. But your attitude, which is continuous learning, being able to think critically, these are capabilities. So that's for us as mere humans. If you come to the superhumans, who are the consultants, what do? How can you give somebody advice on a future that you don't know? First,
sorry to interrupt, but has anyone ever proposed a project to you where you're like, I actually don't know where to start, just out of curiosity? Or have you just thought, you know what, there's always a solution?
Look,
just have to think
there's always a solution, but we don't know it.
Yeah.
Every project I start, if there is an obvious solution, I tell them not to work with us. Because if the solution is obvious, then all you need to do is people with a pulse and some brains to do it, right? It's a humdrum project. Strategy consultants are never asked about something that's very obvious. Strategy consultants are always asked about how do we succeed in the future. Well, look, if I knew the future, then, I'd be a fortune teller. However, what we do have is a whole bunch of skills to say how do we best prepare for the future. So what we tell people is we're not going to give you a strategy. We're going to help you be future ready. And future readiness is all about, first of all, think through many scenarios. Where could my industry go and for what? Just like your wildcard question now, we prepare people to say, here's the most likely scenario if things are going well. But there's 4 other scenarios that could happen, and they're all plausible. And there's also a wildcard scenario. Now, you need to build capabilities today for all these things and keep monitoring daily which of these things are maturing. Imagine if you're Starbucks or Emirates Airlines or any kind of sales-oriented company. You know the scenario today, more or less, of where the world is going. Zara, the company, made their money by being able to respond unbelievably fast those days to the customer needs because they were able to change their supply chain within weeks to respond to people are buying more black t-shirts, produce more black t-shirts. Marks and Spencer almost went out of business because they were not responsive. They had a strategy. They say, we know what we're doing. I asked the board of Marks and Spencer that specific question. And they said even the board, they said, we were a great company who is full of shopkeepers. We know how to stack the shelves. We know how to buy good things. We know how to manage supplier relationships. We were never in tune with the customers' changing habits. Zara did the exact opposite. They built this whole radar of what is changing and how fast can we respond. So when we sell strategy now or ideas, we tell people, here's what we think you should do, but let us help you build the capability to adapt moving forward. So it's about future readiness. So I can tell you, not a single project we start knowing the final answer. We know directionally where we're going. And I always use this example, which you might find very appropriate or completely misleading, of a boxer. Mike Tyson has a very famous quote. He says, everybody has a plan until you're punched in the face. And then you have to roll with the punches, right? So strategy is about, we have a plan. You know you're going to win. We call that directional strategy. You want to win. You want to build muscles. How you get there, you set a strategy now, thinking I'm going to do X. But the minute you get the first punch, you move to Y. Imagine you're being punched in the face and you say, but I have a strategy for 3 years. I'm not budging. There's only one end to that scenario. And that's why you need, as a strategy consultant, a lot of trust with the client, is being able to say, here's a whole bunch of solutions. And I can't tell you one of them is the word to throw the kitchen sink behind it. And this is especially true today, Mandy. So if you asked me 5 years ago, we had a little bit more clarity. 20 years ago, we used to do 10-year strategies. 20 years ago, I helped companies do 10-year strategies. We can barely see 6 months ahead now, right? So we call about rolling planning, rolling strategies. And I differentiate between a directional strategy, we know what we want to be when we grow up, versus a set path. And the path is where we teach a lot of agility. And that's where I think the new age of strategy consulting now has to do a lot with future readiness, as opposed to a set future that you're chasing. And hence you have to build these capabilities inside. Businesses that will win in the future are the most agile. I mean, Darwin said that from day one, right? Species that survived were not the strongest, the cutest, or the biggest. They were the most responsive, the most agile, the most adaptable. And the same thing is happening for companies now. The ability to spot trends. That's where consultants come a lot. I help a lot of my clients by saying, here are the 5 trends you should worry about. That's what they don't usually see on their own in their own units. So in a very long way to answer your question, to say, how do you deal with Terra Incognita? I think the whole world is Terra Incognita now, and every single assignment is Terra Incognita. And if you claim to anybody that, don't worry, we know what's going to happen, trust us, it's a matter of time before you make that big mistake, because it's so unclear for companies, for countries, and even for us as individuals. So better to be much more adaptable, but setting a directional strategy is unbelievably important. The path there is adaptable.
If you were to draw an average timeline for a directional strategy right now, how many years ahead are you planning for a large company?
So I'm going to borrow an idea that I learned from His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, and I talked about it actually in the Sheikh CEO book. He mentioned once something called tactical strategy. So Sheikh Mohammed likes a vision. So there's a vision. You have to have a vision for about 5-10 years. What do you want to be? And I always call this, where do you want to be when you grow up, right? When I grow up in the next 5 years, I want to be there. And then how do I get there? How do I get there is you have to decide where to play and how to win. And we used to do it in long term. Now I think the maximum you can plan for is 2 years in terms of strategic direction. And then tactics have to be adaptable almost daily, depending on the industry you're in. So if you're in oil and gas or in airlines, you have to make some bets, right? Because the plane takes 5 years to be designed, and then oil well takes 10 years to be drilled and for it to pay back. So you have to make some bets. But if you're in tech or sales or FMCG, you're almost checking daily what's happening, who's boycotting what consumer. One influencer could take your whole company into left or right in terms of people's preferences. So I think I like the idea of tactical strategy. That term isn't contradictory anymore. I think tactical strategy is being able to say, I have a 2-year strategy that I'm going to continue monitoring. So if you want a generic answer, 5-year vision, 2-year strategy, 3-month plan. But anything longer than that, you have to be forced to do it. You have to be in oil and gas and say, look, I can't afford to think of 5 years. It takes 20 years to drill this thing. Countries have to think longer term, but you also have to learn. I'll give you this advice for the students, anybody who's listening, you have to learn how to quit. Quitting is a superpower. I don't buy this whole idea at all of keep going, keep trying, fall down and get back up again. That's like banging your head on a ball. You have to learn how to quit. There's a fantastic book called Quit, and it's written by one of the most phenomenal poker players in the world. The lady who wrote it literally says you have to learn in your life when things are not going well, when to quit and change course. Quitting is not a bad word. We have reached a point where quitting is a toxic word. It's not. In fact, it's a superpower, knowing when to quit. That's the strategy we saw successful in Dubai. Amazon, you name it. Anybody who succeeded has tried a million things, learned how to quit the 90 things that did not go well, and found the 10 things that went well and doubled down on those. But without trying 100 things, there's no magic solution to finding the 10 things that's going to go awesome. So it's like move fast and break things. I'm using a lot of those one-liners that the business leaders do, but they're genuinely true, especially in today's world. Nobody knows where the future is going to go. It's Terra Incognita. But our advice to clients is we'll work with you. We'll put those 5 things in the strategy, directionally where we're going, and within the next 2 years, we'll tell you which 3 of them to quit and which 2 of them to double down on.
Brilliant. And just to follow up on that, when it comes down to where you get your knowledge and where your team are learning about the trends that matter for your clients, I know you're very involved with the World Economic Forum, but what is your source, or what are your sources of knowledge and trends and mega trends right now? Is there anything that you would recommend our listeners to pay attention to?
Well, look, I think the challenge for everybody today is continuously to learn and to be able to spot trends and see. I don't think sources are the problem. There's more sources than we need today.
And I think that's a problem in itself, right?
It's a problem in itself. It's a problem in itself, being able to choose the sources. I have a lot of places that I rely on. So I'll give you a few ideas, a few tips. One is the must-know sources. So you can't afford to be a strategy advisor without having the must-know sources. You have to follow what the World Bank is saying, what the IMF is saying, what JP Morgan is saying. These are people who influence the world, whether you agree with them or not. A report by the World Bank or the World Economic Forum or JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs will impact the world. So you have to have this. This is hygiene. You need to know what they're doing. Then you have to look around and see what are the other sources of knowledge that you need to continuously learn from. And to continuously learn from, I mean daily updates of knowledge. And I have developed this habit of following certain countries and certain companies who I think are pioneers, right? And I put them on my Google alerts. So anything Amazon does, I get a daily email because I think Amazon is always ahead of the curve. I think I love Singapore. I love Dubai, but I live in Dubai, so I'm a bit biased. And by following pioneers, you can spot trends. You're not going to follow a company or a country that is mediocre. So I follow these pioneers and I have daily about 20, and it takes seconds to read those. And then the third source of knowledge is the areas you want to double down on. Look, we used to teach people that you have to be a great leader and you have to be great at everything. Analytical thinking, public speaking, charisma. And now we're saying that's not going to work for everybody. There's 64 leadership traits. At best, if you're lucky, you're good at 2 of them. So what's the point in me teaching you to be a great public speaker where you're a great political player? So you have to each find your 2 to 3 leadership stones and just build on those. And only you can find out those things. So once you double down on what you're good at, I like analytical thinking. So I keep reading all these books about that connect the dots. I'm an addict to reading books. And I use things, websites that summarize books. You've got Blinkist, book summaries. So there's a lot of those audiobooks. I'll tell you the challenge though, Bianca. It's not about what to learn. It's how to avoid the stolen focus. You have a lot of time to learn every day, but you waste it on Instagram and swiping left on X, what they call Twitter, looking at Netflix. When they asked the CEO of Netflix what his biggest competitor is, what he said? He said sleep. Because that's when I can't get to your eyeballs. Everything else, I'm happy to compete. Happy to compete with NBC. Happy to compete with Twitter because I know you're awake. When you sleep, I lost you. So they're all competing for your attention. And we have lost a lot of our focus to all these things. So people tell me, I don't have time to. I think you have time. Don't tell me you don't have to read that book. You don't have time to read that extra alert. You have time because I see how much time you're on WhatsApp and Twitter and swiping on Instagram. So it's not about time, it's about deciding what matters. I don't believe in time management, I believe in attention management. If you tell me you don't have time for something, I say it's not important enough. People who tell me you don't have time for a gym or learning or reading that extra book, no, it's not important enough. Because if it's important enough, we all have time for stuff.
I think that is the perfect place to end the wild card. You heard it here first. You want to be an achiever, you want to make it to the top, then you have to apply yourself. Yeah, exactly that. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have this conversation with you. Is there anything you would like to mention to our listeners that we haven't covered already? Is there anything you would like to plug? Are you speaking anywhere? Do you have another book coming out?
I would always like to plug my book, which is closest to my heart, which is The Sheikh CEO. I have a bunch of new books coming out. One of them is called 1833. You heard it here first. That's the year that actually effectively Dubai started, Al Maktoum Zia. I call it the Dubai Code. And the reason I'm writing the Dubai Code is 85% of the world today today is what we call emerging markets. 85%. That is home to some of the fastest growing economies in the world. That is home to the fastest growing populations in the world, where middle class is erupting. The future of our world economy is going to be in emerging markets. And a lot of the emerging markets have the chance now to shortcut development. Shortcut development by saying you don't have to wait now for 30 years to become, or 50 years or 100 years. With technology today, every single villager in Nigeria has a smartphone. They can shortcut development. So the Dubai Code is all about how to achieve unbelievable results for a country in an unbelievable short amount of time. If you live in Dubai, you'll know what I mean. We're a country who's used to building a whole island in 3 years and celebrating going to visit it. So that's what I would love people to read that. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so
I really
much.
enjoyed this.
Thank you.